Oh, okay. So this is like our official toast.
Yeah, Jeff Siegler. Ooh, Pinot Grigio.
Pinot Grigio.
Is it good?
I don't know.
Okay.
We're gonna find out.
Cheers, everyone.
Mm.
Cheers to,
Oh, it's not bad.
Just to hanging out together.
Yeah, here we are.
Yay, friends.
Mm-hmm.
New friends.
Mm-hmm.
My feeling of Pinot Grigio always is usually it has the least amount of flavor, so they can't mess it up that bad.
Yeah.
Like it's just cold.
You can always drink water.
Yeah.
Is pretty much what it is.
Right.
It's starting to warm up. It is getting worse, but
Are you a wine snob?
no, not at all.
Mm-mm.
You're not either?
No.
You know
No.
what? I want to have a talk about snobbery during our chat.
You do?
I do. I
Okay.
think there's
What's
an
the-
interesting vein.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm a snob about anything though. Maybe I am.
Are you a snob about not being a snob?
No, I'm not that either. I don't think. I don't know. I guess I if I ran across it, I would be a snob about something.
It's an interesting direction for us to go in. And
Okay.
You might see. Maybe.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
I don't know
if-
what's
if
going to
there-
happen.
If there's a segue, take it. Otherwise, I'll try to remember.
Okay.
Jeff Siegler, Revitalize or Die. Katherine Loflin, the City Doctor, giving keynotes here at the North Carolina Main Street Conference, annual conference. Before we talk about place stuff, I want to hear your worst keynote giving horror story. Catherine Loflin.
Oh my God.
You know, if you told me that story earlier, you know I'm going to bring it up on the podcast.
I know.
Here we go.
Okay. Well, I think, yeah, probably the most humiliating would have been when I was giving a keynote to an entire municipality in Canada, maybe 10 minutes into the speech, and the soundboard, because I was at a lectern, and it was kind of an open lectern, and so I could see the soundboard. It explodes during my talk and catches my hair on fire.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so I'm literally like a Roadrunner cartoon, you know, where the Acme explosion goes off, and I'm like literally like hitting my hair to get it to stop being on fire. And you think that would be the end of it, but I lose PowerPoint, I lose everything, and then the sound guy for the hotel is literally between my legs the entire talk trying to fix the soundboard.
It wasn't that bad.
So other than that, it was, but you got through it. And everybody talked about, I don't know how you got through that. I got a standing ovation because my hair was on fire. There was this guy between my legs. I had no PowerPoint trying to describe data. It was bad. Now you go. Yeah.
Jeff Siegler, you go. Do you have any horror stories like that?
Beat it.
Nothing. No, I can't even get close. About
Yeah.
a guy between my legs during a
No.
presentation. First off, I feel like we're in like a duel here, like some sort of battle,
Yes.
like,
Oh,
face-off.
it's about to.
Like-
Just wait till I get to a question I want to ask both of you.
Like
You guys-
revitalization consultant. It's the most obscure showdown of all time.
Catherine, we'll give that one to you.
Okay, thank you.
I'm so excited to talk to both of you because what I think is really amazing about the three of us sitting here is that all of our work deals with the emotional, interpersonal infrastructure of our places. I mean, every single community on the face of the planet goes to town on the physical infrastructure, so the condition of roads and of public services and buildings and all of those things. And then we really go to town on the economic infrastructure, like how jobs and small businesses and large businesses and all of, like incentives and all of those things. And we never ever talk about the fact that communities are made up of people.
Yeah.
And that means some things for our communities. And in both of the interviews we just did, in the keynotes, you guys say the words pride, and you say love, and frustration, and apathy, and anger. So, question to both of you. Catherine, ladies first.
Okay.
Why is talking about the emotional attachments that we have to our place, the emotional perceptions, the connections, why is that so important to the life and the health and the future of our community?
Because it's tied to hard economic outcomes.
Say that one more time for the folks.
Because it is tied to hard economic outcomes.
Tell me more about that.
We know for a fact that emotional feelings about a place are tied to the economic outcomes of that place. How you feel about a community will translate to how you behave in it today. And how you behave in it today translates to where you spend your money and whether you buy a house and whether you start a business and whether you spend time in the community and whether you invite other people to spend time with you there. And sooner rather than later, in fact, that translates to economic outcomes for the place. So the reason why we should be focusing on feelings in all this other kumbaya stuff that people think we focus on is because it is a factor in the economic success of places, period, the end.
Jeff,
Get up, yeah.
whatever she said.
I would, it's so tied to our health. That's sort of the area where I'm fascinated by. It's how much our place is tied to our health. And that we are, what is our GDP? GDP is now something like 18 to 20%. The healthcare industry is something like 18 to 20% of our GDP. It is the single the single biggest expense we have as a country. And that's because what we do is treat one person at a time.
Yeah.
So everybody's living in these places that are making them sick. It's mental health, social health, physical health. These places that make us obese, that only serve to increase heart disease, that are making us lonely, that are making us depressed, that are making us anxious, that are making us addicted, on and on and on. We keep building places that are having these terrible health outcomes, and we keep spending more and more on it. And this whole system keeps growing. But what we never think to do is, if we improved our surroundings, if we improved our built environment, in essence, you could lift up the health of tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people at a time. So that's where, that's why I talk so much about the emotions of place and the feelings of place. Because when we don't feel good, literally when we don't feel good, we make poor decisions.
Yeah.
And when we make poor decisions, our lives get worse.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is putting a lot of people in places where they're making really poor decisions for themselves, not being kind to one another, not being kind to themselves, and we're seeing the outcomes play out time and time again.
I love this because you're both putting very concrete evidence, very concrete outcomes on what happens when communities disregard these emotional connections. I think a lot of our places are under this impression people will be happier if we give them more jobs, or we give them more stuff, or we do the stuff that we're doing better, and people will be happier. And if they're not, then it's their problem. But we've done our job as a community, and you're really making the case no, your emotional outcomes are directly tied to your economic outcomes, to health outcomes. A happier, more emotionally connected population is better in every aspect. It's not just the icing on the cake that you get when you did the real work and now everybody gets to sing Kumbaya and be happy. No, you gotta sing Kumbaya and be happy to do the real work.
Right.
I love that you're using the word outcomes, because I think that's such a key focus here, because outcomes come from inputs.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't make a great meal if you have shitty ingredients. In essence. There's just no way. And you can't make a great place when you use cheap materials. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to build these places extremely fast. We're trying to build them with the cheapest materials. We want a developer to come in and, let's do this 200-acre mixed-use site, or build 500 homes at once. That never works. That's never going to give us quality outputs. And what we're seeing, just like the fast food industry, Americans are so sick on fast food, it's created this host of problems because we can't ingest it. Literally, you can't make food that fast and have it be healthy. And we've created fast food places. We've created these places that have been slapped up quickly, and our bodies just aren't meant to deal with it. We're not handling it very well. So I think that outcomes are directly tied to inputs, and we're using just terrible inputs, and then we seem sort of surprised that the outcomes are so terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, what we learned in our research was really the most important thing that determines attachment to place is positively rating the social offerings. And I do think, the public health around isolation is obvious. And so what we find is when you love where you live, you refuse isolation. And that's so important. And more, it's like how I started today is for too long, communities have been the backdrop of our lives when they're a main character. They will help determine your outcomes. And whether you engage and you love and you want to be a part of your community or you do not want it at all, will have direct impact on your own individual outcomes when it comes to your health, your prosperity, and your ability to live the life that you think you deserve. And so, it all comes down to really not only caring about places being growing and vital places, but again, the outcomes of the individuals within them.
I have a question about something you said that I want to dig into a little bit. It's fascinating.
Okay.
You use the
this
word
is getting good.
you use the word refuse, and that surprised me. People that refuse to be isolated. I would have thought it was people that almost can't resist being out in a beautiful public sphere. Why refuse?
Well, because I think, and this is me kind of riffing on what I see, and I always say when I have data to support something or when I say this is just how I feel, I think that there is enough social things going on in the world that you have to work hard to not withdraw. I think the die is cast to just being like, okay, I'm going to just stay in my little house where I can control my environment. I know what's happening here. It is more risk taking to go out into the world these days, I would say, and not know what you're going to get in your environment. And I think when people love where they live, they trust their environment to create that space for them where they will feel belonging. And so they refuse to get suckered into what I think a lot of people are feeling right now is the motivation to isolate versus the motivation to get out and enjoy the place that they love.
Interesting. I would, as you were saying that, I was thinking about there's a lot of that, and I've often been thinking of it in terms of this lately. Like if your place isn't better than a Netflix show,
there you go.
Then what do you expect?
There you go.
If it's not better than
there you go.
Reels, then there's you're losing your competition. Yeah, there's proof to the. It's like when when the holiday parade happens, everybody comes out.
Sure.
Because that gets more. So they're still desperate to be with one
They
another.
are.
They're still desperate, but you're downtown, I'm guessing, on every other day just isn't compelling enough. It's not a good enough argument. It's not better than a Friends rerun. But that night when you host the Christmas parade or whatever, it is.
Right.
And when you see them out there, like, man, you can feel how desperate they are. You
can
see their joy and their happiness and their pride. And it's like, wow, does it suck? It just sucks that we only give that to them 4 nights a year.
But, we saw that also. We were talking about this earlier during COVID, where people would go out into like their cul-de-sacs or sit in their driveways and basically yell at each other just to have an interaction at 5 p.m. every day. They would establish these times where they would go grab a drink because they were so desperate. Humans cannot survive without social interaction. When children are born, we do this skin, you have to touch on the skin, and it has to be this whole thing. Even in COVID, I saw some of the most creative, wonderful ways that people tried to work around the isolation because we crave it. And yet, you're right. I mean, 9 times out of 10, it's a lot safer at home and happier at home. And Netflix, if you can't beat Netflix, I'm putting shoes on for that?
I want to throw in a little factoid to follow up, and then, Jeff, we'll get to your thought. Vivek Murthy wrote a book together talking all about the epidemic of loneliness and social isolation. And in one of the chapters there, they talk about the different neural pathways of the brain. And he said, well, there's two, if you want to describe it in these terms. Like one is the task-oriented. I'm in my cubicle, I have a job to do, I need to focus, I need to do this thing. And the second one is searching for social connection. It's organic, it's spontaneous, it's looking for people. And so if you have these two pathways, the question was, what's the resting state of the brain? Like, what is the pathway that the brain most wants to be in all of the time? And through their studies, they found that it is the search for social connection. That when in every possible instance and opportunity, the brain instantly switches to searching for people, which is why When you sit down on the couch, what do? You turn on Netflix and then you grab your phone because your phone has social media on it. And I can, by proxy, encounter social interactions. So
Yeah.
I'm bored out of my brain. I have nothing to do. I don't have purpose in that moment. The brain goes, oh, I need people. I need people because if I don't foster these relationships, I can't survive in the world. I'll have a poor life. All of these bad things will happen. I have to look for other people. And so then we have this little replacement in our hands, and I'm looking for people. And I'm looking for people. I'm looking for people. So I love when you talk about like other people is more than just something nice to have. It's
Right.
It's a necessity that we need.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, and there's, it's just, we're not creating a compelling enough public realm. We're not, our downtowns have degraded so hard that they're not worth visiting. They're not good enough. They're literally just not good enough to compel people to go use them. They're not better than scrolling or Netflix, and that's because we haven't maintained them. We've allowed the buildings to decay, and it's scary usually because you've got a narrow sidewalk and wide roads, and then somebody's driving as fast as they possibly can down it. So they are scary and they're uninviting. And so I just don't think they're, and then because of that, no one else is out there. So it's there's nothing that fun about going to do it. It's really a poor substitute for what we need. But I'm extremely fortunate tomorrow to be having comparison, and what I find why I want to go back is that it's the most entertaining show in the whole wide world. I mean, it is the most compelling thing. There will never be a movie or a TV show that compares to standing out on one of the streets, to sitting in a cafe and having coffee or a drink and watching the world go past. Because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
The built environment's gorgeous. It's extremely safe.
You're seeing other people.
And that's what kills me. Like, that's the biggest thing that withdrawal I go through from when I get to visit a place like that, and then I come home. I don't see people anymore. Like, from the moment you walk out of the door at 8 a.m. until you come, stumble in at midnight or whatever, you are around people constantly. There's never a moment where you're not surrounded by people and you feel so alive. And then you get home and you're like, well, where is everybody? Like, you go and get in your car to go get groceries, and these things that are inherent to the human experience of procuring supplies to cook and eat, and you have to do it alone. And that's so depressing. And it's like, man, it was never supposed to be that way. We really botched it.
Yeah.
And it's pretty lonely.
It's the thing that makes airports tolerable. The fact that you're surrounded by people and you get to watch them.
Yeah. Well, it's funny.
And the drinking's okay. Anyhow.
Yeah. Well, so I keep thinking about, and I've been thinking about this a lot today. My downtown, we put in a $60 million park. It was only supposed to cost $30 million, but whatever. So Cary is the second largest town in the country. We refuse to become a city.
Wow.
Because we like we think we're small town charm, so we just ignore the fact that we are like at 190 some thousand people. And we created this park, and it's this destination. And so now our downtown is full of people. And Jeff, even when there are people, there will be people who don't like all the people. And there's always like, well, wait a minute, now we had this issue. So Cary started promoting like all of this great technology we have in the park. So they would talk about how the water that you get in the water fountain is better than the water you can buy at the grocery store. It's more filtered. And they started talking about how we have little sensors in our garbage cans. So if the garbage in the can gets above half, somebody's little beeper gets pinged and they change it's all this stuff. And so all these people started coming into Cary. And all of a sudden we realized that, when you build it, they will all come. Not just, this isn't this little thing for Cary. This is a thing for everybody. And the next thing you know, we have this lady who came in on the train. And Cary clutched their pearls like you wouldn't believe, because she started washing her laundry in the fountain because she heard that the water was cleaner than what she could get at her apartment in Durham. And so now we're like, so it's always something that either you don't feel like people around, and then you build it and they come, and then you're not sure you like all the people around and everybody who can now have access to your place. So it's humans are
It's
complicated.
kind of the idea of like everything has a trade-off.
Correct.
Like you paint that wall in a beautiful mural, which means that you have one less wall to paint a mural on, which also means that you decided on some kind of art, which means that some people are going to like it and some people
Correct.
are not. And I think sometimes in our communities, we kind of operate like there aren't trade-offs there shouldn't be trade-offs to anything. Like every single person should like that mural.
Right.
Every single person should like that fountain. Every
Yeah.
single person should like that part. And that's just not true.
Right.
That's not true.
Yeah.
Right, and it's, sometimes I see where communities want to go for the gimmicks, and I'm not suggesting this park is a gimmick, but I see a lot of gimmicks around. So stop it, just be good for your people, just be good for your residents. You don't need to worry about anybody else. If you're the best place to call home for the people that live there, that's going to be good enough. That means that you have a local grocer. That means that it's safe to walk around. That just be cool for the people that live there and stop worrying so much about being the world's greatest antique show or whatever. Those places, and I had an interesting conversation with something like this not too long ago down in Florida that also reminded me that sometimes we confuse people and cars. So I was working with this community, and they're like, oh my God, they're building 5,000 homes out there. When that's done, where it's going to destroy our quality of life, it's going to ruin everything. It's going to be awful. Like, so 5,000 people a day, it's like 5,000 new people living there. Like, so if there's more people in the restaurants, that's bad enough. No, if there's more people in the street or on the beach, that's bad. No, I'm like, well, is it cars? Like, yeah, it's cars. It's like more cars are going to ruin everything. That's less parking. That's more traffic. Like,
Yeah.
well, let's separate the two. Let's separate the two because more people is great. More cars, bad. And I think we often kind of get those things confused in our work.
Yeah, we conflate the wrong things. We're like, oh, this is evil. We're like, well, no, it's not. It's this.
Yeah, more cars are bad, but
Yeah.
It's kind of what you were saying earlier, Catherine, about like you got to know the right problem. Like,
Right.
You don't just say, well, I'm going to do placemaking because placemaking will save us, and so bring in the food trucks and the murals and the lights over the streets and all of these things. Like you got to know your community and what your community needs,
Right.
and then meet that need as opposed to just going, this is what they told me to do on
Right.
Facebook or Instagram.
Yes. And I think it's sort of like with the attachment metric. Like I told the group today, optimism matters a little bit more for attachment, and recommending the place to others matters less for attachment. And when you ask people why recommend is not as important for attachment, they say, because I don't want people to screw up our place by having more people show up here. So it is not a commonly accepted, and I think in the South, I will just put myself out there on this, we do not equate more people with a good thing. We do not. And so it's if you came into a southern town and say, I will bring more people in here, not everybody in the room is going to be happy about that outcome. And so it's a weird thing because part of our narrative as a place is this small town charm. How can we be economically sustainable? How can we have a tax base that works for us without necessarily becoming something we don't recognize? And so the whole recommending of a place because you love it doesn't happen as much because people are worried about killing the goose that laid the golden egg.
This is super cool because like both of you use this analogy over and over and over again of our relationship to our places is like our relationships with other people. Like the dating analogy, things like that. And I think what you're talking about, Catherine, is similar to like folks on the dating scene, and they're trying to figure out how to get that next date and all of these things. And I think we have these coping mechanisms in our minds that have us desperately holding on to a certain thing because it protects who we are.
Yes.
Like I'm not blunt and an asshole. I'm telling people the straight, like I'm a straight shooter.
Yes.
And so like what we're really doing is we've developed this coping mechanism to drive people away so that they don't hurt us, but then we say, well, this is our virtue. This is our thing. When really what we need to do is look at ourselves and say, well, is that thing that I thought was doing this thing actually doing this thing?
Right.
Is that actually the problem?
Right.
And kind of unraveling that. Now, if you look at that and you're like, no, this is important to me, then so be it. But like our small towns going like, well, like we don't want all those people coming here destroying our small town. Well, is it possible that more people coming here is a good thing and we can still keep our small town just with more people?
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I get you guys to maybe fight for a second? Because
Oh,
we're
no.
agreeing about a lot of things.
Oh, boy.
And I want to point out that folks, if you have not listened to the individual episodes with both Jeff and Katherine, go back and listen to it. Jeff, we talked about like you're the tough love guy.
Yeah.
You're saying the things out loud that people in their communities want to say out loud. Like we're not doing this right. We're not doing this right. This has been screwing us up for a long time. And here comes Jeff Siegler from Revitalizer Diet saying it out loud for everybody. And then everybody shares your memes and things like that so that they can indirectly say it to their own communities. You're the tough love guy. Sometimes you have a reputation of being harsh. And then here comes Katherine Loflin in her episode, and she's talking about, you got to talk to people about their strengths. You got to tell them what they do really, really well. And that's where you start. And is it possible that both of these things live in harmony? Are they in conflict? What are your, Jeff?
Seems doubtful.
Jeff, what are your thoughts about Katherine's encouragement to say, go into a community and say, start with what you really do the best and go from there? What do you think about what she said?
I think it makes a ton of sense, and I think that is good and probably breeds a lot of optimism, positivity, but it is not necessarily my way, and I don't, that's...
Why? Why is it not your way?
I've just come to it from a point of view that we can't get better unless we admit our faults. That if we deny something that's wrong, we never have a chance to correct it. And so it's just my approach of let's deal with those. Let's be upfront about things not being great, because when we don't talk about it, if we deny that we're apathetic, then we're not going to ever address it, and then that problem won't get any better. Don't go to the doctor and be like, I feel great, and get home and be like, oh my God, I'm really in bad shape. So it's not that it's a better approach, but it is certainly mine to let's be candid about these issues that are really holding us back so that we can start to address them.
Katherine, I will give you a chance to defend yourself and then attack Jeff.
No, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to disappoint you. But I will say, no, so I agree that head in the sand is a bad way to be. But what I feel like, coming from a different background than Jeff, is I feel like the way to motivate change is to start with something that you're getting right, to start dealing with the thing that you're not getting wrong. You're getting wrong. I mean, as we talked about, I didn't say you stopped at your strengths. You leverage your strengths to deal with what you're not getting right. And I think if I just sat there and said, well, you guys are doing great. This is wonderful. Don't worry about this other stuff. Yeah, I'm an idiot. That's not the case. But what I do think is, like, I'm trying to motivate change in communities sometimes. And I feel like when I think about going into Detroit and all those places, if I didn't give them something in that moment that they could feel good about, I had no shot of motivating them to deal with what they were not getting right. But by the same token, I respect that, communities need to be told what's up. I mean, it's true. It's just I get to what's up with one step in between before he does. I just don't know if it's that different, in that sense.
I think at the end of the day, you have to build trust in either case.
Right.
And I think I build my trust by being a little blunt and saying, like, not everybody will tell you this, and I also get to leave at the end.
Correct. Isn't that good? That's a good thing.
Drop that mic and hop back on the plane.
That's a good thing.
No, it does. I think both are ways to build trust, which is what you have to be successful in this, is to say, like, people will come in and tell you everything's great. And there are consultants that won't ever get to the bad side of things.
Right.
And that's a problem.
Yeah. No. And I listen, his claim to fame is revitalize or die. Like, there's nothing in that message that says to you, hey, you're going to get, like, okay, you're going to get your ass handed to you, and you probably deserve that.
I'm not nearly really, it's like, it happens every time I go to Keynote. Like, you're going to
Jeff, everybody listening at home, Jeff is a big teddy bear.
He is. He bought us all wine.
Yeah, he brought us boxed wine. He made sure everybody was good. So Jeff has a heart of gold.
He really does.
So a little bit of the reputation precedes him, but
I want to hijack things.
yeah.
Oh, here we go.
I know that's your job.
No, that's
sometimes
fine. That's fine.
It's something that I want to talk about, because I really love sitting with you two. It's pretty amazing to have this chance. And something that I see in my work a lot, I'm interested in your thoughts on, but it's like this low civic self-esteem when community starts to convince itself, confirmation bias. Like, we're run down because we want to be run down. We don't have, our buildings are in bad shape because we like run down buildings. We don't have nice restaurants because we don't like. Have you all experienced this where a community has convinced itself that they don't like nice things, that they are run down, and it can be this huge hurdle that they get over, but it's like, all people like nice things, but boy, these towns have convinced themselves that they're the town that doesn't.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that, Katherine?
I mean, I have. I mean, we talked about that some, and when we were talking about some of the towns in our interview, it's like those kids in middle school that used to make fun of me for doing well on the quiz, and they would compete on who could get the lower score on the quiz. Like that was the goal. Who could fail it the best. And I do think sometimes when you feel like you can't achieve anything better, you decide that what you have is exactly what you wanted. And I don't know how much of that is authentic and how much of that is bluster because you don't feel like you could score well on the quiz, so it becomes cool to fail the quiz.
So rather than accepting your failure, you're reframing your failure
Exactly.
as a success, because that's easier.
And you don't see another option. You don't see a way out of other than making the failure a success. But I have seen that where there's like, we're real. This is us. And I don't know. I mean, I would have to spend some time to figure out, is this bluster because you feel like you're just done and you're out of options and so you're going to embrace the bad as good? Or is that really how you feel? I mean, what do you think, Jeff?
I think it's kind of a confirmation bias of it's this way because we want it, and it's also really hard to understand how did it get this way because no one likes it.
Oh.
That's what gets me. I remember down in South Louisiana, it was, hey, I've got a question. Who all's in favor of the empty buildings here? No hands went up. Like, who all would like to see something done? 100 of 100 hands went up. It's like, well, that's weird. Like, why? Why isn't anything being done? And I think that that's a real conundrum because if everybody agrees, what keeps this from happening?
So the follow-up to this,
interesting.
I think, is a post that you had made a couple weeks ago, in that, like, so somebody does come in and they do start renovating that building that has been sitting there that everybody's like, oh, somebody's got to do with it, and then they finally start and they're making it better and everyone's like, boo, no, you suck. And then somebody else comes in and they're like, you know what, we need more social offerings for people and more events, and they're like, okay, cool. And they're like, how about this event? And they're like, no, that sucks. You suck. And like you do. Can you first, Jeff? Can you explain a little bit about the thoughts of that post and maybe apply that to the communities?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of the civic bullying. I preface everything I say with the word civic, I guess, in front. But
it makes you sound very professional and probably increases your fee.
Good. Yeah, there's a lot of bullying goes on in this, and I really do think it stems from kind of this low self-esteem of well, this town sucks, but like, how do I square it with me?
Yeah.
Me as an individual, that I live in a town that I think that's beneath me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to talk trash on it. I'm going to talk it down because what I'm doing here is saying I'm better than that place. And then I've seen it in individuals a lot. I've seen this, particularly having grown up in a Rust Belt type of town like this. Why would you move here? Why would you start a business here?
Yeah.
So you do some of that of like, this place gross. I can see it, and I don't love it. I'm better than it. So they'll talk bad to outsiders. And the other thing that they'll do is when you try to leave to better yourself, they're like, who do you think you are?
Yep.
It's a lot of, they're mixed up with their own image, they're mixed up with their own self-esteem.
It's like the breakup, like, fine, and then you list all the reasons why that person sucks.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. You'll never find somebody like me.
Yeah.
That was kind of the point.
You don't know what you're missing. Yeah, so like both of you are considerably more seasoned in community work than me. So I have not run across like a community specifically like this, like embracing their inadequacy. But what I was thinking about is this book called The Courage to Be Disliked. And if you're working in communities, it is a book that you should absolutely read, because man, it equips you with the mental tools to be able to navigate the emotional part of our communities. But one of the core ideas in it is that we use our situations to excuse the work, not to excuse not doing the work that we know we need to do. So, for instance, like the boss at work that's making your life terrible. Well, my life is terrible because my boss is terrible.
Right.
And I can't do anything about that. My life is terrible because my boss is terrible. But what is actually the case is I am looking at my boss as terrible to remove the responsibility I have to my own life.
Yeah.
My boss is not responsible for my life.
Right.
I am. But I hand that responsibility off to them so that they are now doing the work that I should be doing.
Right.
And I think sometimes in our communities, like we do the same thing. It's like we use ourselves as the excuse of why we're not doing the work that we know we need to do. It's like, well, we're run down and we're like, this is who we are, and if anybody tries to change that, screw you. Well, what it's really doing is it's an excuse that we use to not address the needs that our community has.
Right.
It gives us a reason to disengage, to not have the responsibility, to not do the effort, to not do all of these things. It gives us a reason to not care about our places. And I think like that's kind of the death rattle of our communities, is when we get to that point where you are using yourself as an excuse to not make yourself as a community better.
Yeah.
Like, really hard to come back from that.
It is. Yeah, it's devastating. I mean, everybody's psyche all gets built up. There's so much, there's so much momentum and stagnation and apathy that it's hard to break through, and it becomes, it's not only the physical aspect. I mean, you don't do your laundry for a day. It's fine. Don't do it for a month. It's overwhelming. And that's what we've done. It's like, well, you don't have to maintain that building every day, but boy, if you wait 3 decades, now we've got a real problem. That now it's the whole town, the physical infrastructure is so weakened. The emotional infrastructure is weakened, as we talked about, and everybody's just kind of convinced that this is how we want it, and so it really, really is hard to overcome. And I kind of mentioned before we started talking, but one of the other areas I see it in that I think is fascinating, is sort of so tough to overcome, is this kind of snob shaming.
Yeah.
Where you'd ask, oh, are you a wine snob? Like, no, I'm not, but I don't. But we need to be real careful calling people snobs, I think.
Why?
Because what happens, it's like, oh, you like nice things, you must be a snob. And like, no, we all should like nice things. Like, we all do like nice things. Everybody enjoys a nice meal. Like, that's not specific to people of a certain income class. That's humanity.
Yeah.
That a well-prepared meal tastes better because it's healthier, because it's all like, so or it's like, you want to go to Paris, you must be a snob. Like, I like to feel good and healthy, and maybe we should insult people for wanting to be healthy and wanting to be good.
Yeah.
And so there's a real danger I see, and it's like dressing people down for liking nice things in their town. It's like, man, we need to be. Yeah. We should probably lift people up for wanting nice things, because it makes our lives better and healthier. It makes our community stronger.
To connect it to your keynote, one of the things you talk about is standards. And if you make having high standards a bad thing, things will never get better.
Right.
Because the people that could lead that charge, that could do the work, that have the experience, the resources, the knowledge to be able to raise the standards of our housing quality, of our business community, of our public services, they go, well, it's not safe here for me to do those things. So they either decide to back off and say, well, like, status quo is fine, average is fine, I don't want to get annihilated on social media or wherever it is, so I'm just going to keep doing things even though I know that it could be done better. Or they're going to go to a different community and do considerably better there, because folks. They are not snob shaming
Right.
them. They're saying, no, you can do this better. Please do.
Mm-hmm.
We will pay you to do it. We will support you to do it. Anything you need to accomplish the thing that you want, we will give to you, as opposed to being shamed in the public square.
Yeah. I mean, I love the marriage and dating thing. And it's like a couple who's like the girl, and it's usually the girl saying, hey, guy, I need you to step it up on some things. And the guy's like, well, I do all this other stuff fine, and there's nothing, and other guys are not as good at this as I am, and I think we need to go to therapy. Oh, no, no, no. I don't need to go talk to somebody about blah, 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 blah. So a lot of times I think that, and girls can be the same way. Girls can really love to just sort of, it could be worse with some other guy. So I'm going to just sort of put up with this crap, accept less for my life. Guys do the same thing. She's, on a scale of 0 to crazy, she's a 9, but she's not a 10 on the crazy scale. So I'm going to just and I'm going to act like that's okay. I kind of like that she's crazy. I kind of like that it's not going well. I kind of like the chaos of my life. And it's the same thing, because when we are criticized, we defend. And it is our nature. And either we say, that's exactly how I want it to be, or we say, well, you would have it worse elsewhere. This is as best as you're going to get. And when you talk about standards, what we talk about, I know in what we used to talk about when I did therapy, couples therapy, is like, who's going to raise their standards here? Or are y'all happy in the mud, and you like fighting like this, and you like living like this? If so, then go do that. But if any one of you raises your standards, you're going to have a problem, because you're not, one of you is ready to raise your standards, and the other one's like living in the muck of where you're living now.
That's wild. Yeah, absolutely. It also makes me think how often I hear the trope, government should behave more like corporate America. It's like, well, I've never heard a corporation say, we're going to lower our standards this year. That's how we're going to meet our goals. We're going to ask.
Or lower our expectations, and then everything will be through the roof.
I mean, that's something that corporate America just doesn't do.
No.
And another thing that every corporation does, which is a funny thing that we lose sight of in government, is realizes that their clients and customers are human.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always an emotional pitch. It's always how does our product, how does this Corvette suit your identity crisis? Like, how does this sneaker blend with your identity? Like, it's always this emotional pitch. But boy, when it comes to city, when it comes to economic development, or all these things, never do we take the emotional approach. How can our town connect with you as a human? How can it elicit those emotions? It's a wild disconnect.
That is a really fascinating perspective, because the best, the most lucrative, the most successful businesses understand that every decision is an emotional decision. For all we think like it's rational and we've weighed the pros and cons, there is a reason why I will pay $40 for a pizza, because I think it's going to blow my mind. And then all of a sudden I get like, I have to pay $40 to pay park in a parking garage. I'm like, no, how dare you? Because there's an emotional part of my body that goes, oh, this is something I value, this is something that I don't.
Yeah.
And then we go into our communities and we're like, oh, everybody values this, of course they do. And we treat people like these little robots that if we just put in the right numbers and we give all our nice little obedient people their little cookies and their little things, like, oh, okay, then we've done our job. People are people.
Yeah.
Economic development has convinced us that cost is the only thing that matters, and it ignores that humans make decisions based on value.
Yeah.
I'll pay more for the car or the home or whatever,
Right.
because of how it makes me feel, of how the image it projects of all these things. But yeah, when you want to ask the banker that's sitting on the Main Street board or the economic development, it's like, no, let's get to be the cheapest.
The example I use all the time in marketing and attraction retention is communities want to say, especially small communities, we have such a high quality of life with a low cost of living. And they think like, oh, this is going to be great because all of these rich folks from the big cities are going to come flocking to our small towns because they're going to get a bigger house for less money and they're going to pay less for food. But here's the thing, those folks do not want to pay less for those things. It's the wine bottle experiment. You take the exact same wine, you take the exact same label, you put it on the shelf, and one is $10 and one is $75, and without fail, which bottle do people pick as the best tasting wine? It's the more expensive
Yeah.
bottle.
Let's take that one further.
Please.
They also enjoyed that bottle more.
Yes.
It isn't just that they got more value out of it, they enjoyed it
Yep.
more.
You confront them with, like, it was the same exact wine, bro, and they're like, no, I definitely tasted better wine. Like, no, it is exactly the same kind of wine. Even it's worse wine. Like, no, like there were floral notes there, and it was earthy tones. Like, no, bro, it's exact
Yeah.
same. Perception is reality.
No, it is. And that's why, in all of, I always make the point of saying that when I study communities, the only administrative data point I ever use is GDP growth. Everything else is a perception. When I talk about social offerings, aesthetics, and openness and all that other stuff, it is the perception of those in the community. And what we have in places a lot of times is a tale of two cities where the same things are happening, but one segment of that community will experience the same things a completely different way than another segment. So it is perception. And a lot of times the first thing I do when I go into a community is, do we need to build a better mousetrap, or do we just need to change perceptions about the mousetrap you have? And a lot of places just start with, okay, we got to do something else. Well, maybe, I don't know. Like, is it perception or is it reality? Because perception is what wins the day every time.
One of the first jobs I had traveling for work, South Carolina. I go on the plane. It was post-COVID time, but everybody's wearing masks, requirement to wear masks. And I'm seated in my seat, and here comes this woman, probably around 55 years old, and she not only has a mask on, but she has two masks on, and then also a face shield. And she comes kind of awkwardly walking through the aisle, and she's seated right next to me, and she sits down, and like I kind of want to know the scoop, like why are you like quadruple bagged here?
Quadruple bagged.
And she starts talking to me about how she was she had a medical issue. She used to be an epidemiologist,
Oh,
which
okay.
was really interesting. And she used to be an epidemiologist, and then she had a health issue that kept her indoors for 2 years, and she could not go outside for 2 years, and another 3 years to finally get healthy enough to go back to work. And here she is flying around the country trying to get a job again in her field of study, and she's talking about this 5-year gap in her work history.
Yeah.
She's like, this, like every time I show people my history, they want to know about this 5-year gap, and regardless of what I tell them, like they just look and say,
Yeah.
where did those years go?
Yeah.
And I looked at her and I said, well, what if instead of thinking about these 5 years as the thing that's holding you back, what if you call yourself the 5-year fighter? What if instead of positioning it as like, oh, I'm sorry, like I was really, really sick, but I'm still good now. Like, what if you show every single person that interviews you, like you are the only person that they have met that fought for 5 years through unimaginable pain and hardship, health. You could die at any moment, but here you are hopping on a plane, flying across the country going, I want to do this work. What if you're the 5-year fighter? And so when you're talking about like, what if we change the perception of the mousetrap or the magnet or whatever metaphor you want to use? What if looking at the weakness that we have as the strength? Or what if we look at this thing as something that is as something that can help us instead of
Right. No, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean, but unfortunately, I think dealing with communities is a lot like dealing with people just on a larger scale, where you have to find what is your leverage point. I talk a lot about hiding the broccoli and how you get into the room, you hide the broccoli, and then you have to give them the broccoli. And that's not very different from what Jeff does, but I feel like, the way that we present problems to people, the way that we present realities to people, it will either bring them to the table, or it'll make them run from the table and cling to their current reality or whatever that might be. But I mean, it's hard work, and every place is different. I think one of the things that happens in placemaking too much, and we should know better because we're out talking about the uniqueness of places, and then we go around and we cookie cutter every single place. We do every single place. You need this, and we act like it's a recipe. It's not a recipe. These are people. And so that's why when we talk about quality of life, yeah, there might be certain things that a place needs to thrive, but it's got to feel like quality of life to those people. And so I think we forget the human side of our work so much, and we're so hell-bent sure what every single place needs to be a great place that we lose sight of how you frame it, how you deal with the actual humans that live in that actual place that might not feel like quality of life to them.
Yeah, it's not a recipe, they're ingredients, which means that you still have to learn how to cook.
Right.
Last question for both of you, and you can, whoever wants to take this one first, do it.
You're going first.
If you, okay.
Because I'm scared.
If you could go into a community and instantly fix one thing, what would it be?
Vacancies.
Why?
I think that is the simplest thing to fix, and it's also the greatest detractor. I think it is the single biggest source of lost revenue at the declining economics. I think it's such a look. If you go in the mirror tomorrow morning when you wake up and you look like hell, you're gonna have a bad day. You know, the beard's off, I don't know, your clothes don't fit right.
You spent the first hour and a half of your day going, I look fat in these jeans, and I hate my hair, and I hate myself, and then you have to go out into the world and you say, look at me.
You're gonna have a bad day. You know, that's just how we operate. It's like, well, yeah, I don't look good, I don't feel good, so I'm gonna make poor decisions about myself. I'm gonna talk more about myself. I'm gonna expect less out of everything in life. So that's what vacancy is. It's a constant reminder that you're not good enough. It's a constant reminder that you're the type of person that lives in a rundown town, which means you're a rundown person. And that sits pretty heavy, and that's pretty hard. And I think a lot of people live in rundown towns and then have to square themselves with being maybe a rundown person. So vacancy would be my number one thing. And again, it just takes a piece of legislation.
Vacancy is related to aesthetics in how you're talking about it. Catherine, what you had something brilliant that you said in the keynote. Like, aesthetics is
the first and most consistent message a place sends about itself.
Oh, say it one more time for the folks in back.
So aesthetics is the first and most consistent message a place sends about itself. It is literally the skin on a human. It's everywhere.
Aesthetics don't lie. I mean, we've done this thing where it's like, oh, let's play it down. Let's not worry. Like, if you didn't navigate the world through aesthetics, you would be dead all the time.
Yes.
Tell me about judging a book by its cover.
I'm sorry, please do.
No, you tell me. Yeah, please do.
Please judge a book by its cover. It's the reason we design book covers and album covers.
Yeah,
People
that's
make
true.
all the time. Like, if you were like, oh, I don't want to be judgmental, maybe that's a fluffy dog, or maybe it's a bear. Who cares? I'm just gonna pet it. Like, you would die a lot. And you know, it's like, oh, I shouldn't go in that house or down that alley because it looks sleepy. Like, again, if you didn't make those decisions, you would be dead a lot.
It's
Yeah.
literally physiological, the
Yes.
judging books by its cover. Like, well, we're a little bit rough around the edges. Like,
Yeah.
well, what we're doing is sending a message with these vacancies that people do not want to be here.
Right.
Right.
Look at all of these people who do not want to be here. Now,
Right.
people don't explicitly say that in words, but you drive by that every single day and you see those empty buildings, like, nobody wants to be here, nobody wants to be
Yeah.
here, nobody wants to be here.
Yeah.
You're teaching yourself, like, well, this is a place that people do not want to be.
Yeah.
You're telling the outside world, we're a town that doesn't care. But you're worse, you're telling yourself, we're a town that doesn't care.
Yeah. No, he's not. And I'm thinking about, I cited this in the keynote, but, this when I was talking about aesthetics, I remember, I'll never forget this research that I did way back before graffiti was cool. And it found that the more graffiti you see from the time you leave your house to your commute to work, the lower your social trust. And it's too disparate, like, why would what? But if you think about it, it makes perfect sense. And it was before graffiti got cool, but it's the same idea. Is like, if these people will deface our community. They don't want to be here. They talk shit on it. They give it, and so I'm a part of this. I have hooked my ship to this star, and it is not a star, and that's where the whole optimism about your place's future comes in so strong with attachment. I as much as I'm on the human side of psychology and attachment and all this stuff, I cannot argue with that, because it is a very consistent message that we built it and they did not come, and they don't want to be here. And I live in a town where we have an opposite problem, where we build shit and everybody comes and they're paying $1 million, $2 million for a townhouse, and the people who work in the town can't live in the town. So it's like all the time we are sending messages of you belong here or you don't belong here. Yes. And either both sides of the coin creates the same outcome, which is a message of go away. You don't belong here. Either nobody else wants to be here. Why the hell are you here? There's something wrong with you. Or everybody wants to be here, but we don't want you here because you obviously can't afford to be here, so we don't want you here either. It's a predominant problem. And even though in my mind I was thinking, well, I would want people to feel like, because I so worry about the mental health of our country right now, and I so worry about people feeling a sense of community and belonging. And what happens when you don't feel like you belong anywhere, you start to hate yourself. And so my goal is all the time, I think about social offerings, I think about belonging and all that stuff. But by the same token, when he said vacancies, I was like, he ain't wrong. I can totally buy that argument, 100%.
In our conversation, we talked about attraction, retention, people, communities trying to increase population, things like that. And I think this is reframing that in a way by saying, if that is your goal, what are you doing as a community that communicates to people that you don't belong here?
Right.
So rather than thinking about what are the right things to do,
right?
What are you, to Jeff's tough love, like what are you doing that is sending the wrong message? The vacancies that you think don't really matter in the scheme of things, the trash in the downtown, that is somebody else's problem, all of these things. You're sending this message like, you don't belong here, citizens.
Yep.
Tourists, you don't belong here either. And you might have excuses and reasons for all of why those situations exist.
Sure.
But in the end, you're telling people, do not come here, do not come here, do not come here.
But it's, when I tell communities to think very broadly about their perceptions of openness, and people think I mean like, oh, are we nice to newcomers or whatever. That's not what I mean.
You had a great differentiation in your keynote about the difference between openness and tolerance.
Yes. So tolerance means I'm going to put up with you, and isn't that nice of me? And it is still a power differential where I am still the one in power, and I'm acknowledge your existence, and God, please praise me for my wonderfulness.
Yes.
Versus,
I'm okay with living on the same earth as this person.
I will white knuckle my experience with you. But make no and welcome and openness, and it's like you belong here as much as I belong here. There's no difference between you and I. But the whole idea of like this that we tolerate people versus that we feel like everybody should feel comfortable in their skin as they are in this place, it's a really hard metric, and a lot of places completely fail at it. And it's because places are very difficult to achieve that level of welcomeness in the way I intended it to be in the measurement model versus tolerance, which is still a power differential in many places.
That messy humanness. Katherine, if you could go into a community and instantly fix one thing, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm worried about the frickin' vacancies. Thanks, Jeff.
You had a better answer than I.
I know. I think he's not. I think he's not wrong. I also think the opposite side of the coin is true. Like, well, what if you don't have any vacancies, but it's so priced out that you can't, people who work there can't live there. And that's something that keeps me up at night. But I think to me, because I am worried about, like I said before, the whole, communities can be this, I believe this, saviors of humanity. And we need communities now more than ever to create a sense of belonging and attachment. And I would want everybody who is in a place to feel like they belong there.
Yeah.
I would love that.
The saviors of humanity, like that is the idea that I'm latched onto right now. Like we are so obsessed with the national community, the international community, these communities, these people, these things, these issues that are so far removed from who, yes, important. Please do not mistake my words.
Yeah.
Like, are they absolutely important? Yes, they are. But meanwhile, we walk out of our houses in the morning, and we don't know our neighbors, and we go to these jobs, and we go to these schools, and we eat this food, or we have this healthcare, like literally things that immediately and directly affect our lives, and we don't give a shit about any of it.
Yeah.
When if we just cared more, if we got to know each other, if we talked and we communicated better, if we shared things together, if we helped each other, like just one person to one person, not huge multi-billion-dollar projects, not insurmountable things, like we just were kinder to the people that we meet every day, we can change the world, we can save the world. Like the internet, social media, the chaos that's happening is so out of our realm of control, but what we can control is our immediate existence and our life that we have with the people in our local community.
Well, place is the great common denominator. We're all there for a reason. And the thing is that there are so many different kinds of people in a place, but the only thing we all have in common is that place. It is the thing we all have. It might be the only thing we all have in common. And so, feeling that sense of that is the common denominator that you build the math problem off of. Because at the end of the day, we all love, or we all are sharing this space in this moment together. And, it doesn't solve the world's problems, but if you can at least feel like you belong where you live, then that great common denominator starts to do some good in the world.
Jeff, I heard you breathing heavy when she was giving her response.
Oh, did I?
It's hard to top what both of you just said. I mean, you've got it all right. That there's a obsession with national stuff, but simultaneously there's a obsession with interiors. Like, no, it's our block where we lead our lives.
Yeah.
It's our community, it's our neighborhood. We don't focus enough on that, but we all share a place, and that's the common denominator. The manufacturer, the family, the school district. We all share a patch of grass, a plot of land, and our ceiling and our floor is that place. The environment that we build will dictate the outcomes of everybody within it.
Yeah.
And so if we build poor, crappy, shitty, cheap
Yeah.
environments, we're giving everybody poor, crappy, shitty lives, and we're seeing terrible outcomes, mental health, physical health,
Yep.
et cetera. And when we build nice places, we see extreme outcomes and everybody does better. The only reason why we obsess about their stories when somebody comes from sort of not humble beginnings, but when somebody rises out of a place that's run down, it's amazing because it never happens. Like we shouldn't wait around for these stories to be exceptional. We should create places that foster beautiful lives for everybody that lives in them.
Yeah.
How do we change the world? We care about what we share. I want to thank you, Jeff, and you, Katherine, for an amazing conversation, 3 amazing conversations. People watch, listen to all 3 of the podcast episodes. North Carolina Main Street, so gracious to be able to give this to folks. Very, very cool. Also, I want to thank you guys for the work that you're doing in communities across the country, in literally changing the world, and you're helping equip people, and you're saying you can do it too, and you're speaking life into them, and I want to thank you for that work. It is not going unnoticed. Katherine, Jeff, thanks so much for a great conversation.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Sweet.
That was amazing.
Fuck yeah!
Really enjoyed having that conversation.
That was great.
That was one of the better professional things I've ever enjoyed. I loved it. It was so fun.
It was.